All right. Welcome, everyone, to the new JFK show, number 251. We've got Rouse and Kay tonight. It's about the midnight press conference, and we're going to really go into depth over that. And I happen to have a video of that right now that I'm going to show y'all. So,
Gary, before you go there, you want to explain that this is Halloween here in Wisconsin, and I have some very spooky affects on my image. So, you know, that explains it.
Yeah. He's got Dr. Fetcher's got a light show this time. All right, so here we go. We're gonna go ahead and play the midnight press conference. Let me turn my microphone around to catch it. Here we go.
Well, I was questioned by a judge. However, I protested at that time that I was not allowed legal representation.
Did you kill the president?
No, I have not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
You have been.
Nobody said what?
Sir?
You have.
Nobody said what? Okay, man. Okay.
What did you do in Russia?
I positively know nothing about the situation here. I would like to have legal representation. Well, I was questioned by a judge. However, I protested at that time that I was not allowed legal representation during that very short and sweet hearing. I really don't know what the situation is about. Nobody has told me anything except that I'm accused of murdering a policeman. I know nothing more than that, and I do request someone to come forward to give me a legal assistance. No, I have not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
You have been.
Nobody said what?
Sir?
You have been.
Nobody said what? Okay, man. Okay.
What did you do in Russia?
Questioned by a judge. However, I protested at that time that I was not allowed legal representation during that very short and sweet hearing. I really don't know what the situation is about. Nobody has told me anything except that I'm accused of of murdering a policeman. I know nothing more than that, and I do request someone to come forward to give me a legal assistance.
You go. So, fellas, whoops.
Well,
That's very, very difficult to watch that and to see someone so.
Gary, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
well, I think we can now. Try it again, Gary.
What I was saying is that it's just amazing to see him so politely saying that he was questioned by a judge. He wasn't allowed legal representation in a short and sweet hearing. And this demon from hell that we're supposed to believe that he is just not there.
Yeah, that's a good point. You put it very well, Gary. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I'm equally impressed how calm and cool his demeanor. He's completely relaxed. Not a single bead of sweat. No apprehension. Talks about the short and sweet hearing before the judge. Very reasonably requests someone to come forward to give him legal representation. It's very impressive to see the guy.
He came across as a very mature person and intelligent, and very well spoken. Who could parse a phrase intelligibly.
Right, and a very surprised person when he found out he was charged with killing the president of the United States at midnight from a reporter in the middle of a conference.
Yeah, and even a reporter shouted out at the end when he said he hadn't been charged with that. All he knew that he's been charged with the murder of a policeman. That's all he knew. He hadn't even heard until someone said that, a reporter in the hallway. And then at the end, a reporter said, "You have been charged with it."
And that's when they hauled him off. As soon as he found out he was charged with killing the president, then they hauled him off. And also the person on the left with the glasses, Larry Rivera, saying it's 95%. That's the future head of the CIA.
That's just shocking, Gary, that should be William Colby right there at the press conference. That is profoundly disconcerting and certainly suggestive that the CIA had a profound role in the assassination of JFK.
Well, one of the images in the PowerPoint that I brought, and hopefully you can get it to work, Jim, is a GIF that the wizard made of the last moments of the press conference. And you see that Colby figure looking to his left, taking a cue from somebody who was obviously signaling him to abort, take it out. Yeah. And he nodded his awareness, and he was basically saying, copy that. And immediately he put his hand on Oswald's shoulder and shoved him mid-sentence and basically just forced the end of the press conference. And it only gone for 1 minute. The thing that rattles me the most is, first, that nothing like this has ever happened before or since. There's been plenty of high-profile and not high-profile prisoners, defendants. Most recently, we went through the whole Epstein ordeal. And Jim, did you ever do a show on Epstein?
I did a lot of reporting on Epstein.
You did a lot of reporting. Well, you agree with me that he didn't commit suicide, right?
Very clear. We had both Michael Batten and Cyril Wecht on national television now talking about it. And, and more reports are coming out, Ralph, that the injuries to the bone, Judge Janine was just tonight talking about it too, are inconsistent with
suicide.
With
suicide. All right. Well, other examples would be like Timothy McVeigh never got a press conference. And think about it.
Sirhan.
Oh yeah, very good. But not only that, but the whole process by which Oswald would be walked down the hallways and reporters would be engaging with him, conversing, asking him questions, and he would try to answer. That doesn't happen either. I mean, basically, they don't want reporters talking to, the prisoners. Didn't happen with Epstein. So in other words, there was a lot of engagement between Oswald and the press. And then supposedly they held this midnight press conference because the press wanted more time with Oswald, as if, you know, kowtowing to the press is all the police have to do. And then after going to all the trouble of doing it, where they actually opened up this basement room and had everyone file in there, and they were crowded as sardines in a can, and yet it only went for 1 minute, and then boom, we got the signal. They ended it, and abruptly, there was no statement made like, well, we apologize, but time's up, we have to go. They just, very abruptly, you know, pull the plug on it. And as we get talking about the images, I'm going to give the audience a heads up that, first of all, I sincerely believe that there was an ulterior motive for having this, which had nothing to do with the press and nothing to do with.
Yeah, quick question, Ralph, before we go, while it's on my mind. Do you believe that they thought they were going to go through the entire press conference without Oswald finding out he was charged with killing the president? And as soon as he found that out, they pulled him out the room?
Well, I doubt that they expected that was going to happen. I think you're right that must have been a surprise that it came out that way. But let me make one more point, and that is that I know myself, and if I had been in Oswald's situation, and I knew, of course, that I was innocent, that I hadn't killed anybody, and in talking to the police and in talking to reporters, I would have been much less nice about it than Oswald was. I mean, you would have seen the rage in me, and probably unwisely, because, you know, obviously if you get rageful, and, you know, somebody may think that, see, he's a maniac, he's rageful, he's
obviously
capable of violence. But Oswald was so totally non-violent, out of control, that he really defied the whole image of a mad dog killer.
He was actually relaxed. He was relaxed.
He was relaxed, controlled, civil, and
articulate.
Yeah, I believe because he was he believed that the CIA and the people that he was working for, his own government, was going to get him out of this.
Yeah, I believe that too. I do believe that too. But if you read Vincent Bugliosi, in his book, he actually does all this psychoanalyzing of Oswald, and he gives him this personality of hate, that he hated America. He hated America's accomplishments. He didn't go so far as to say he hated Kennedy. Instead, he said that Kennedy was a surrogate for the hate that he had for America. Mm-hmm. And as you look at Oswald that night, you don't get the feeling that he hated anybody. He just had such a...
He was a nice guy.
About it. A nice guy. That's the best way to put it. He seemed... And I'll tell you something. I'm a little bit irked sometimes at people who are supposed to be Oswald supporters who buy into the idea that Oswald was this extreme antisocial person, and they act as though, of course, he despised everyone, and he would rather sit alone in a lunchroom staring at the ceiling rather than go outside and have to be around people and watch the parade. And we know that's not true. He did go outside and he was around people and he was watching the parade. But again, there's this image of Oswald as being this.
Notice how it promotes the official scenario, anti-social lone gunman. Yeah. If the guy is a sociable guy, you want to talk to everyone who knew him. But by making him out to be this loner, the question doesn't even arise.
Right, there's nobody to talk to, right? He doesn't have any friends.
Jim, let's begin the PowerPoint, and I want to begin by saying I'm going to throw out a red herring here. Just make you aware of something that I'm totally 100% convinced that there was an ulterior motive for having this midnight press conference. And I'm open, I'm not certain, but I'm open to the possibility that they were contemplating killing him that night, as they you know were going to, as they eventually did on Sunday, but that they were actually thinking that they just might be able to pull it off that very night, and that may be the impetus for it. And if so, it means that they aborted it for one reason or another. And what that could be, I could only speculate. But there are parallels between this event and the one on Sunday, which I'll get to. But first, let's look at this image. This is Jack Ruby. And officially, the story goes, and I can remember seeing it on TV, where Peter Jennings of ABC said that this was Ruby on Friday afternoon at the time of Oswald's arrest, that he was in the hallway stalking Oswald. Well, I knew that wasn't true because Ruby denied that he went to the PD during the afternoon on Friday. It's not something he would have lied about. It wasn't a crime to go there. And since he was taking responsibility for shooting Oswald, and only because they told him that he did it, which is one of the subtitles of his narrative. But certainly if he had gone to the PD in the afternoon, he would have said so. But he adamantly denied it. He said that at that time he was at the Carousel Club. He was making calls. He called his sister Eva, and he also made some other calls. And Larry Crayford even confirmed that he did that. And the phone records even showed that he did that. So there's absolutely no doubt that that's where Ruby was at 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. But it was the brilliant Amy Joyce that came along and focused on that newspaper that's being written by the man deep in the picture. And she looked it up and found out that that was the Saturday Dallas Morning News, which came out very, very late Friday night, like midnight or 1 a.m. at Saturday morning, and certainly not in the middle of the afternoon on Friday. So that proves that this image is not from Friday afternoon. This is from Friday evening. This is from the midnight press conference. This is the hallway. And that's why we're seeing Ruby here. So this is Jack Ruby. You should take a good look at him. Take a good look at his ear. He had a pretty large ear. Notice that he is just about completely bald on top. Very, very little hair. Notice how well the suit fits him. To me, it looks almost like a tailored suit because it fits.
Oh, I'm sure it is, Ralph.
So well.
It is a tailored suit.
I mean, that fits much better than the suits, suits off the rack that I buy. I'll tell you that. In any case, in fact, even if you look at the man reading the newspaper, you can see that his suit looks like it's sort of tight fitting, where it seems to stretch, and whereas on Ruby, it just looks
natural.
It just looks like a perfect fit. So probably it's a perfectly individually tailored suit. So anyway, go to the next image now, Jim. All right, now I want to read this aloud to the audience. I don't know how well that they can see it. This is from a narrative that Jack Ruby wrote, but not alone. They insisted that he have a co-writer, and I'm going to add the word editor because I'm sure that he did some editing. And the man's name was William Reed Woodfield, and he was a television script writer. He happens to be the one who wrote the scripts for the very successful TV show Mission Impossible. And they brought him in to co-write this.
Ralph, basically, he wrote it and Ruby approved it.
Right. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of Woodfield in here, and it was published in various newspapers around the country. This particular one that I found was from the Chicago Daily News. And there was a subtitle to it. The main title was Jack Ruby's own story, but different, it sort of had chapters. And one of the chapters said, "They told me I shot Oswald." Think about the implications of that. Meaning that if they hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known. I had no idea. So it says, "I never at any time thought of shooting him. I thought that he would get a trial. I had no thought of shooting him. It never entered my mind. He was still only a suspect. He was innocent until proven guilty. And then at the press conference, pertaining to the press conference, he said that he got up on a table in the corner to be out of the way and to be able to see everything. But I'm very struck on this idea that he had this moral concept that he was innocent until proven guilty, that he was even he was entitled to a trial. And to me, it rules out the possibility that he was going to lose control and suddenly shoot Oswald. I mean, that's a very deep-seated conviction that a person has. And there's another thing to consider is that he had to know that, you know, the police were involved with transferring Oswald, and that they certainly didn't want their event, you know, just exploded by him going on a shooting spree. And he had this tremendous admiration for the Dallas police. It was almost, really, it was like an adoration almost. They were his heroes. And I've often wondered about it. I'll take a moment to recall the movie, The Manchurian Candidate, the original one with Frank Sinatra and Angela Lansbury, where these Korean soldiers get abducted by communists in Korea, and they're taken to a Soviet place in Manchuria where they're given drugs and brainwashed, and one of them is turned into a killer, where he is given a type of a programming where he can be triggered to kill anyone on command. That's the character that Lawrence Harvey played. And his character's name was Raymond Shaw. And the others, what they did to them, all these other soldiers, including Frank Sinatra, was program them to think that Raymond Shaw was the greatest guy who ever lived. And they were all like robots, where if you asked them about Raymond Shaw, they would say, Raymond Shaw is the kindest, gentlest, most decent human being I have ever met in my life. And it was this drone that they would repeat, and they didn't even know why they were saying it, but they would come out of them. And I'm thinking, I'm wondering if at some point Ruby was hypnotized to worship the Dallas police, to want to do their bidding, and to never have a bad word about them. Because they had a lot of bad words about him at the trial. They called him homosexual. They said he had, violent tendencies, and he said, rotten things on the day of the shooting, and he knew it wasn't true, but it was beyond him to say anything critical of the Dallas police. But the only reason that he accepted that he shot Oswald is because they told him that he did it. He had no thought to do it. He had no memory of doing it. And even when he was told he'd do it, it did not conjure up any kind of a visual memory or image of him having done it. His mind was blank about it. And the reason is because he didn't do it. There was never anything, he didn't forget. It's never anything got inputted because it didn't happen. Okay, go to the next slide, Jim. All right, very important point here. Jack Ruby was disfigured. His left index finger was amputated right about the halfway mark. So I would say that that's right about the middle of the second digit of the index finger. There's 3 digits. So instead of having 3 digits, he had about 1.5 digits. His index finger was about as long as his thumb. There were different stories given as to how it happened. One was that when he was in the Air Force working as an airplane mechanic, that his finger got caught in some type of machine and it mutilated it, and so they just amputated it because it couldn't really be saved. And then the other theory, which I find much less tenable, and I consider it to be just part of the lore about Ruby, is that he was in a fight with a guy, and the guy bit off his finger in the fight, you know, Mike Tyson style. But that, I don't consider that plausible. It probably happened the other way. But now go to the third image.
Nice little hottie in the background.
Yes, indeed. And I want to make a point about that, too, is that I'm not sure I've ever seen, go back to that a second, Jim. I don't know if I've ever seen a man delight over a female. And there is a larger picture here. I didn't bring it, where you can see the young lady that he's delighting over. And she's very beautiful, very sexy and beautiful. And, you know, he looks like he's about ready to foam at the mouth.
Yeah.
And I think this pretty much decries the idea that he was a homosexual. He was not a homosexual. And
yeah, the one in the background's not bad either.
What?
The one with the dress on in the background's not bad.
Right. Well, he surrounded himself with beautiful women. He could do that. Okay, go to the next image, please. All right. Here we have the Jackson photo of the shooting. I guarantee you that is the arm of FBI agent James Bookout wielding the gun. But notice that the finger going through the trigger guard is his middle finger. That is not his index finger. And it is a very, very peculiar thing for someone to fire a gun with their index finger. First of all, let me explain to you, in case people haven't thought about this, that you automatically have a lot more strength and control and coordination with your index finger. Your index finger is your go-to finger in your hand. You know, when anatomists talk about the hand, they don't talk about the thumb as a finger. They don't say you've got 5 fingers. What they say is you've got a thumb and 4 fingers. Because the 4 fingers, they work together very often, right? You flex them, extend them. They just are designed and they're coordinated to kind of work together. But the thumb works apart from them. And we speak of the thumb as being opposed to the fingers. It's in opposition to the fingers. And it's the thing that enables us to grasp objects the way other primates cannot do. It's one of the things that makes us distinctly human. But the fact is that you don't have as much strength in your middle finger as you have in your index finger. The index finger is in a better mechanical position to actually marshal and to really put into use the major muscles in the hand. So it would be, you wouldn't have as much force against the trigger if you pulled it with your middle finger. But there's another consideration, is that, you know, with any kind of a pistol or revolver, you've got a cylinder gap at the front end of the cylinder through which burning hot gases come out, shoot out when the explosion takes place in the chamber. And you can severely burn your middle finger if it's running, your index finger if it's running along the gap. So I've seen demonstrations of this where they hold a piece of paper next to the cylinder, or they hold a hot dog. They push a hot dog on a stick and they hold it next to, somebody holds it next to it, and you see the whole hot dog explode from firing the gun. And this is the hot gases coming out the cylinder gap. So it's a very unwise thing to do. There's no reason to think Jackie Ruby would do that because he had an intact right index finger. It was his left hand that had the amputated index finger. I think that they got confused about that. I think somebody mistakenly told them he doesn't have an index finger on his, so you better use your middle finger. And so Bookout did it. And he's just posing here. He never pulled the trigger. And in the garage, you know, nobody, who knows? I mean, I'm going to presume he did use his index finger. But here, while they're posing, he puts his middle finger in there under the mistaken belief that Ruby's was severed, but it was not. And it really was just a mistake in the story. All right, go to the next image, please. All right, this is supposedly Jack Ruby at the midnight press conference. I don't know that anybody has disputed that that's him until now, but I am here to tell you that I do not believe that that was Jack Ruby. I think that was a double or a doppelganger. And the reasons why are because we have that image that I started with of Jack Ruby. That was him that night. And we're going to put up a collage in a minute that's going to compare the two of them. And what you're going to see is that this guy is younger, about 10 years younger, which is a lot of years. That's half a generation. He is stockier in his upper body. This guy looks like he's really well built on top, where he's got just a very thick chest. And you don't get
broad shoulders. Broad shoulders and
thick shoulders. Yeah, he's just, I mean, just, yeah, he looks like he's a stocky guy.
Yeah, and Jack Ruby's got sloping shoulders. You see athletes like that.
Well, we're going to put him back up in a minute.
Yeah.
Then, of course, he's got this practically full head of hair, which is ridiculous. You can see that the other guy is bald. And if you saw it closely, you would see that this guy's ear is very small and nothing like Jack Ruby's. So go ahead now to the next image, and I think we're going, okay, this is them together. So again, to my eyes, and you know, I've been a doctor my whole life. I've been examining people and assessing people by age. I mean, every doctor, when you're doing an examination, first thing you ask the patient is, how old are you? And to my eyes, yeah, I would say Ruby on the left, who is 53, looks about 10 years older than the man on the right. And he's got a much bigger ear. And you can see, I think you can see that here. If you look at this very long ear that Ruby had on the left, and this guy here had a very miniature ear on the right. That's a small ear.
Different lips. For
a full-grown man. The lips, the nose, you know, there's a general sort of kind of likeness, but, and even those glasses are different from the ones that we saw Ruby with. So, no, I do not accept that that guy was Jack Ruby. I presume he was there, but I consider him to be a Ruby double. And that's one of the things that fuels my suspicion that maybe they were going to do something with him. And then shortly afterwards, grab this, you know, Ruby, and Ruby admitted he had his gun on him at the time. So maybe they were planning on doing something like that. And that's the reason they called this thing in the first place. All right, go to the next image.
Isn't part of the narrative that he was in and out the Dallas Police Department stalking Oswald to get a good shot to kill him?
Well, that is part of the narrative. Listen, let me tell you something else. I'm glad you brought that up, Gary, because there's something else that I'm aware of that I can't detail very well, but I'm certain that it's true. There was an account given that when Ruby went there that evening, that he ran into a police officer that he knew, although it may have been a former officer who he knew, and the guy's wife. And so he was talking to them. And they started saying things to him like this, that, you know, really the best thing that could happen would be if somebody would just shoot that guy. I mean, they'd be doing the world a favor. That would be heroic if somebody would just put an end to this, you know, just put that guy down like he deserves. They were talking to Ruby like that. And to me, it's like they were trying to fuel the idea that that he should try to shoot Oswald. And in a way, it's almost reminiscent of what happened with Sirhan Sirhan. Remember the girl in the pink polka dot dress who was talking to Sirhan Sirhan, and she may have been saying things to him, and he was in a very vulnerable state from whatever drugs and hypnosis they did to him to make him susceptible. And who knows, they may have used, I've said this before, I don't know, I'm sure not everyone is aware of it, but I don't know about this night, but I am very, very, very persuaded that on the day of the Oswald shooting, that Ruby was heavily drugged. Even in the narrative, he said that he took twice his usual dose of amphetamines, And then he said he took 5 or 6 other pills, but he didn't say what they were. Now, who would do that? It seems to me anybody, if he was going to say he took 5 or 6 other pills, would say what he took. But all it says is he took 5 or 6 other pills. Well, he may have said more, but Woodfield probably edited it out. Maybe he said, well, George Senator told me I should take these other pills to help me relax or something. And they wanted to bury that, so they just left it out and left that.
They had to have drugged him. There is
They
no
drugged the hell out of him.
There is no way that you can be told that you shot someone without some sort of psychotic drug involved.
Right. I mean, there was a...
And believe it.
There was a Dallas television report. Well, first of all, you know, we have, the three of us have a friend in John Hankey. We know he did the most work of anybody on the assassination of John F. Kennedy Jr. And you recall that he told us about that there was this this Navy or Coast Guard representative named Todd something who was on the local radio station who actually reported that that JFK Jr. had made contact with traffic control on Martha's Vineyard and asked for permission to land. And after that, the story became that no, that JFK Jr. had never made radio, contact. He had never contacted the tower. And the guy who said it, this guy, it was something like
an admiral or something like that.
No, it wasn't an admiral. It was a Coast Guard guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't very high up. But right after that, he was moved, transferred, taken out of there, and actually disappeared. John couldn't even relocate him. I mean, he just literally kind of vanished. He doesn't presume they killed him. He thinks that they just made sure that he was inaccessible, and what he said became inoperative. And that's a military term. You know, when they telling you one thing and they decided they don't want to go with that anymore, they just say, well, that report is now inoperative. And
yeah,
that's
nice,
in this case. Well, something like that happened here because there was, and it didn't involve the military, but the television reporter said that that Ruby in the hall after his arrest was mumbling incoherently. Now that's something that you'd expect a drugged person to do, but that report got tabled too. It got totally, we never heard that again. In fact, it was replaced with stories from the police saying that Ruby was talking tough. I'm glad I killed the son of a bitch, or I hope he dies. I did you all a favor, things like that. Things that Ruby never said and would have had no inclination to say. He wasn't that kind of a guy. But anyway, I think I've given enough reasons to understand why I really am convinced that this was not Jack Ruby. Okay, go ahead, Jim. All right, this is another version of it, and this really bothers me. Recently we were talking about your trial, Jim, and how there's 5 versions of one death certificate for a boy, and as if there's nothing wrong with that, and as if we should just shrug our shoulders at it. Well, in this case, here we've got another version of the picture of Ruby, and now he not only looks 10 years younger, forget about 10 years, he looks 20 years younger.
I agree.
He got this baby face. He looks like this, kid practically. I mean, he's got this soft, round, gentle face, the kind of face that you have in youth before you get modeled and before you get sharp angles to your face. And now Ruby looks old enough to be this guy's father. Never mind his older brother. He looks old enough to be his father, and yet they're supposed to be the same guy. There's no way that guy is Jack Ruby. And what it tells me is that there was a tremendous amount of photographic manipulation that went on. And, which one of them was really, the one that was there that you would have seen? Who knows? I mean, it could have been either. But one thing's for sure, this is not explicable that you should have a 10-year younger version of the same man, and where neither one of them looks like a match to Jack.
And now
Ruby.
a 20-year younger version.
Yeah, no, this guy is, I'm telling you, this is Dr. Sinkate telling you, this man is 20 years younger than this man. Okay, next image, please. All right, now, we're going back to the first guy because I want you to get a good look at this guy on the left. He was a Japanese man from Japan. His name was Atsuyuki Sasa, S-A-S-S-A. And he was one of those guys, I refer to him as the Forrest Gump of the reporters because he just seemed to show up everywhere. I mean, he was in the hallway around the real Jack Ruby. There's footage in which he was standing next to the real Jack Ruby. Here he is now, just one man apart from the surrogate Jack Ruby. And as we're going to see in a minute, he was the closest person to Bookout in the garage before Bookout made his move and went to do the shooting. Now, the other interesting thing about him is he was not a reporter. He was a security officer for the Japanese government. Could
he be an assassin, Ralph?
Well, that's another interesting, I haven't given that any thought at all, but I just find it to be hard to accept that it was accidental, that he was always sort of in these very central moments of turning point. There's just a lot of images of him, and to me it's very, very strange. And in speculating about it, and again, this is just speculation, I'm not claiming anything with certainty, but if he was placed there to be close to this guy, my thought is that by putting someone of another race in the close proximity of the Ruby figure, that the contrast, because of the racial difference, is going to sort of lessen the contrast there is between this Ruby and the real Ruby. It's going to distract from it. And I would apply the same reasoning in the garage, that by having him next to Bookout, and before anybody started questioning whether Bookout really looks like Ruby, and he didn't, they would just reflect on the fact that here he's standing next to a Japanese man, and it would sort of lessen the distinctions. You would just focus on them and not on what you expected this man to look like if he was Jack Ruby. So I'm thinking that's something that strikes me, because it just seems too opportune for him to always be around. And especially in the garage, because, it was a very small space. There was limited, spacing, limited accommodation. So why would they have gotten him in there? He wasn't a reporter. It was supposed to be for the press. He was not a member of the press. He was just a representative of the Japanese government. So again, I find it very strange and very suspicious. All right, go to the next image. So anyway, this is him in the garage. He's holding up a camera. He's taking a picture now of what's happening. And the man in front of him, and we can only see his left arm and the left side of his torso, although we can also see his hat. Thank you, Jim. We're seeing that, derby hat that he wore. And that is Bookout, and he is rushing Oswald, and within a second or less, he's going to pull the trigger, and that's going to be what the big event. Now, while we're looking at this, there's a few other things that I'm going to point out just because it's so glaring. One is that if we look at Fritz in front here, to my eyes, he looks very stiff, and he looks like he is basically poised for something, there's this, to me, there's a feeling of expectancy there in him, that he's just a little bit on edge, like he's nervous, like waiting for a gunshot to go off.
Yeah, and also he's going to make sure he's not a witness to what happens, and he's looking in the other direction.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Gary. I'm glad you said that. Now, the other thing we pointed out is that we're looking at James Lavelle there, his Easter suit, and if you look closely, you'll see that he's trying very hard not to look in the direction of so-called Ruby, of Bookout. He's got his head, and he's trying to kind of look a little bit to the right.
He's trying to look the other way.
Looking to the left. And this way, it explains why he's not taking any action. I mean, if he was looking straight ahead, you have this thing called peripheral vision. And you want to know how far peripheral vision goes? A lot of people don't know this. And on the very, very edges of it, I admit it's very blurry. You're not seeing anything in focus. But peripheral vision actually goes to 90 degrees. So if you're looking straight ahead, you're actually getting some visual input from a 90-degree angle that's hitting your retina. Now, even though you can't focus from out there, it's just impossible. What it picks up, though, very well is movement. And what was Bookout doing? He was moving. He was rushing in. So, yeah, if Lavelle was moving straight ahead, we would have got, Lavelle would have gotten, the quickening of it. He would have picked up this blur of movement, and presumably he would have turned his head and seen what it was. I mean, this is a natural protective instinct, because remember, you go back to the mastodon days, you're a caveman, you're walking through the woods, and there are predators that could be out to get you, or even just other cavemen, because there was rampant cannibalism back then. So yeah, you would basically be paying attention to every moving object in your visual field. But in order to not see it, he's got his head turned to the right. And then finally, we're going to look at this Detective Lowry, who is standing at the corner of the wall there, and he's holding his hands together in front, clasping them. He's clasping them just the way Oswald liked to do, with one hand over the other. And I don't mean to be critical, but when I talk about this, I often say that he's standing like a Jehovah's Witness, because if you have any experience with Jehovah's Witnesses coming to the door to, preach to you, they want to seem just so polite and friendly that they'll often stand like that with their hands like this. Good day, sir. Can we have a few minutes of your time? We'd like to give you a copy of the Watchtower. Well, that's how they stand, the men do. And I can imagine how this stance became popular, how it became a custom, because if a person is standing with their hands clasped together, it shows that they don't have a weapon, that they're not preparing to use their hands as a weapon. It's a peaceful stance. It's a nonviolent stance. So yeah, I can see how it got to be a social custom. But the thing that's disturbing is that even though this frame was taken before the shot went off, even after the shot went off, for a couple of seconds, he continued standing the same way, clasping his hands. Even though there's a commotion going on and this explosion took place, he's continuing to clasp his hands. And you would think that the startle reflex alone would have caused him to jump and move. And plus, he's a police officer. I mean, policemen are trained to react and quickly. So it's all very strange.
It's not only that you got scared, they would just be with some sort of boom, but you could get shot yourself.
Yeah, that's another thing. In other words, self-preservation would be another reason for him to stop doing that, take his gun out, maybe even get down low, something. But to just stand there and clasp his hands after a gunshot, a policeman, it's ridiculous. It was all staged. They knew it was coming. They were all in on it. All these Dallas policemen were in on it. Okay, go to the next image, please.
And so was Sasa, too.
Okay, probably. Go ahead. All right, now now we got this. I want you guys to watch this. We'll watch it again. He's getting a message right there. Somebody's telling him, and he gently nods, and then, all right, now, you don't see it very much, but basically after he gets the message, after he has his head turned, he gets the message, he steps forward, he puts his arm on Oswald, and
We're talking about
although
this,
we don't see it here, he's going to push Oswald.
This isn't supposed to be Colby, is it?
Yeah, William Colby.
Oh my God!
Future.
That's stunning. Absolutely stunning.
Getting a message, and he's making Oswald go. Now listen, here's the point I want to make is this. The ostensible reason they gave for having this midnight press conference was because the press was clamoring for more time with Oswald, so they decided to just let him have a press conference. And I pointed out in the article I wrote about this that, I mean, they had to know that if they gave Oswald a microphone, even for 1 minute, and that's all they gave it to him for here, that he was going to be able to do damage to them. And Oswald did do damage to them. He complained that he had requested an attorney and wasn't given one. He even implored the judge about it. He asked the public to come forward and give him legal assistance. So all of that was very damaging. And then he got to say that nobody had even spoken to him about, none of the police had ever spoken to him about the JFK assassination, telling him that they could, you know, considered him the prime suspect and or solicited an alibi from him. And that's a very strange thing, since they were about to
let me
indict
make
him and arraign him for it.
Let me make an obvious point here. Colby is being presented here by virtue of the hat he's wearing as one of the sheriffs or the special police who are handling this. I have the feeling those hats were to identify the key players in coordinating the assassination on the part of the Dallas police.
Right.
Those are the Dallas homicide hats.
Right.
William Colby was not a Dallas homicide detective.
That identified you as one of Fritz's men. Okay, that was the whole idea.
But William Colby was not one of Fritz's men.
All right, so here's the point, though.
Ralph, just let me make this point before you go on.
And
that means you have a future head of the CIA who's impersonating a Dallas homicide detective at the midnight hearing of Lee Oswald and managing the event.
That's what it would mean.
Right. And then what I want to say is that this instant right here is when Oswald realized his goose is cooked. He takes a deep swallow and they haul him off. And from that point on, you don't hear from Oswald anymore.
And it must have been quite a shock to him to find out from a reporter that he's been charged with the murder of the president of the United States. And remember what they did immediately after this. They took him back to the judge and arraigned him for that murder. So, yeah, at this point in time, Oswald must be pretty rattled. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is this, that even though they gave the reason that they wanted to let the press have more time with Oswald, which is a ridiculous thing that has never been done with any other defendant ever, that when it came right down to it, they only gave 1 minute for this. I put a clock to it. I timed it. It's almost exactly 1 minute before Oswald gets shoved away. Now, if that was really your goal, if that was really your motive and your mission to provide, you know, a way for Oswald to interact with the press, why would you limit it to 1 minute? I mean, you were going to go to the trouble of doing it. And remember, they had to open up this basement and pile all these people down in there, get it all set up. Why would you do it for just 1 minute if you were going to do it at all? So this is what gives me the suspicion, not the knowledge, but the suspicion that they may have planned, you know, a violent act here, and then for some reason that I don't know, they decided to abort it. And that's what this was about. As soon as they realized, no, we're not going to do it, well, they didn't need the conference anymore. They weren't going to give Oswald any more time to score points. And so basically what the message that he was getting was abort, abort, abort. And so they put an end to it. So that's really what I think happened. When I put it all together, and again, with those police people feeding Ruby the idea that somebody would be doing us a favor, they would just put a bullet in that guy, that kind of thinking. And maybe they thought Ruby was drugged up enough that he would do it, but he didn't. And he didn't do it on Sunday either. But they may have been hoping that he did. And that would be the reason for the midnight press
Ralph, I got to say, in my opinion, you are the most underestimated, brilliant student of JFK in history. You are sensational. Your work on Ruby being impersonated by book out in shooting Lee, that the whole thing was staged, is simply magnificent.
Well, I will say this, thank you, Jim. And to me, that is the new frontier of the JFK assassination. And I'll tell you quite honestly that for people who know very well that Oswald was innocent and who know very well that Oswald was in the doorway and, you know, who know very well what the shooting sequence really was in Dealey Plaza, that there were numerous shots that were fired from multiple locations, and who know many other things such as all the great work that Dr. David Mantek has done with the falsifying of the x-rays and the autopsy photos and etc. If you know all that, but you don't know that the narrative about Oswald's death is also a lie, you're in the dark. You are, and unfortunately, you're under their thumb. You're doing their bidding. It's
and throw in that the backyard photographs were staged. That
yes,
Roscoe White was the body double. That the Zapruder film has been massively edited. That there are more frames missing than we have in the extant film today. That it should have been around 1,000. Around 100 frames taken out, turning from Houston on down, another 400 frames after the limousine was brought to a halt, where Larry Rivera has done such sensational work.
And I also want to praise Amy Joyce again, because it was Amy Joyce that noticed that the Oswald in the backyard photos, there's a total of at least 3 of them. I think A, B, and C.
Yeah, I think there are 4, but go
4,
ahead.
Maybe there's 4.
Yeah.
Oswald is wearing a ring in each of them, but he has it on different hands.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even notice that.
Yes,
I've done a lot of work on the backyard photograph.
And in other words, we would have to believe that Oswald grabbed his wife and said, honey, I want you to take me a picture here, posing with my weapons and with my socialist newspaper. And she's going to take several pictures. And then he was going to stop. Well, wait a second, honey. Before you take the next one, let me transfer my ring to my other finger.
It's just absurd.
It looks much better on my left hand than my right. I mean,
absurd,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I
it's
love
absolutely absurd. And these are things that I consider to be deal breakers. I mean, they're just so implausible, so impossible, that it tells you that the whole thing is a fake. And let me point this out too, Jim, that, you know, every so often, they try to, you know, they come out with another defense of the backyard photos. It was about a year or so ago that they got some computer people at Dartmouth.
No, they got this FBI stooge named Hanny Ferret, who actually had a lab paid for by the FBI at Dartmouth.
All right, there it is. You know more than I do.
The most absurd arguments. Okay. I've written to the president of Dartmouth about this subterfuge.
Have you? Okay.
Tarnishing the name of a once significant college. It's embarrassing.
Well, if you read what he wrote about it, and his conclusion was that this forever puts to rest any doubt about the authenticity of the photos. But he only addressed one issue, which is whether the figure in the photo could have been standing, was in a balanced position to stand. Right. He never addressed any of the other and much bigger issues about the photo.
The guy's a complete fraud. I assert that categorically.
And only a very, very uninformed, anyone who is actually knowledgeable about the backyard photos would know that, you know, I mean, and to get knowledgeable, if anybody wants to get knowledgeable, I would say go on YouTube and watch some of the Jack White. And of course, you also did some with Jack White.
Yes, and with Jim Mars. Jim Mars and I co-authored a pice about the backyard photographs.
That there are so many problems with the backyard photo that there is just really, you know, no way. That
anyone who seeks to defend their authenticity has blown his cover.
And think about this also, Jim, and I've given this a lot of thought, that the first person to point out that the backyard photos were fake was Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, that's right.
And he not only denied that they were, he said, no, that was, they put my face in there.
Right.
And he even told them, look, I worked at a photo lab, and he did for 9 months.
Right.
If you take me to the photo lab, I can show you how they did it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Now, okay, here's what that means, Jim. It means that everyone who claims to be an Oswald defender, everyone who claims to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald is innocent, has got to admit that the backyard photos are forgery. You can't possibly claim to defend Oswald.
Of course.
Because look at, if Oswald was innocent, if he didn't shoot anybody, and if, let's say, he had posed with those photos, well, he would have admitted it because it wasn't a crime. I mean, you can't get arrested for it. He would say, yeah, that's me in the photos, but I didn't shoot anybody. How hard is it to say that?
They took the photos to tie together the pistol with which he's supposed to have shot Officer Tippit,
and the
rifle with which he's supposed to have shot JFK, and the communist newspaper is supposed to represent his motivation. So in a single photograph they can put on the cover of Life magazine, you have motive, means, and you know he was at the book depository and therefore had the opportunity.
And speaking of the communist newspaper, there's another point I'll make just to show you how deep and wide this whole framing was. And that is that according to the very evil Harry Holmes, who was the postal inspector who for some reason got invited to attend this criminal interrogation of Oswald.
He was CIA.
He was CIA. According to him, Oswald got the P.O. box in Dallas primarily or exclusively, well, besides for the sake of getting the rifle, so that he could receive socialist and communist newspapers and other newspapers about just life in general from Russia. That Oswald was having Russian papers, that he was subscribing to them and paying the postage to have newspapers from Russia sent to him. Now that is ridiculous because Oswald was working for $1.11 an hour. It was a struggle for him to feed his family. They had to depend on the largesse of the White Russians and others just to get necessities. So the idea that he would have, and it's widely known that he was a penny pincher. So the idea that he would have been spending money to subscribe to newspapers from Russia, which would have been very costly, especially then to actually have mailed, is ridiculous. And furthermore, if he was paying to have newspapers sent from Russia and also subscribing to socialist newspapers, why wasn't a stack of newspapers found in his
good
room there?
F, I love it. I love it. We're going to have you back again and again, my friend.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Gary, take us out.
Yeah, good show. Y'all were talking about the Zapruder film there. I just have to say it. You can always go to Black Op Radio and find out that there may be a frame that's been altered in the Z film. They're still there. That's where they still are. So, all right, fellas. JFK
See you next time.
251. Thanks for coming on, Ralph.
Good night, man. Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was terrific, Ralph. He was wonderful, wasn't he, Gary?
Yeah, we were well rehearsed.
Yeah, it worked out beautifully, didn't it?